We are continuing on Shulchan Aruch Orach Chaim Hilchot Shabbat, and we are up to Siman Reshpehei, the Halachot Av Shenayim Mikra Ve'Echad Targum, up to Seif Bet on Daf Samech Gimel Amud Aleph, going to Amud Bet in your regular prints of the Mishna Berura. So we spoke about the fact that a person is obligated to read every week's parasha, the Torah portion, twice the psukim, and once targum. We went through how to do it, perhaps to do the pasuk, to do it again, and only then to do targum. We went through Maran Chida and the Kaf HaChaim, and what scenarios are lechatchila preferred method of doing it versus the b'di'evet. And we also mentioned that let's be very practically honest. Many people try to be tafasta meruba lo tafasta, the Gemara says. They try to do it in the best way possible, and they end up not doing, because until you get the chance to sit down for an hour, hour and a half, and you know, empty your schedule and be able to do every pasuk twice, and then you may not be able to. If you could do perek by perek, even every day, doing the aliyah of the day, and get it over with by the time Shabbat comes, of course, that would be best. Whether, when you're speaking about doing it rather than not doing it if your schedule doesn't allow. Now, the Shulchan Aruch discusses the Perush Rashi, whether that is considered also Targum. If the point of Targum is to understand what the Psukim are saying, so maybe me reading Rashi should be considered the Targum. So I'm going to read the Psukim twice and then do Perush Rashi. Is that good enough? So says the Shulchan Aruch, Im Lamad Perush Rashi HaParasha Beperush Rashi Chashuv Kemo Targum. Says the Shulchan Aruch, that is considered you having done Targum if you do Rashi with the parasha as you learn it. Now this is already mentioned in the early Rishonim. The Samag writes this, Rabbeinu Asher Rosh paskins like this as well. V'yeresh shamayim, but if you are a God-fearing individual, you should also do the Targum and the Rashi as well, right? Now why is that? Why do you have to do Targum if I'm doing Rashi? And if Targum is necessary, so then what is Rashi doing? That's an obvious question that has to be dealt with. Now, the Perush of Rashi is dedicated to explaining of the Psukim based on the Targum itself. Many times Rashi says the Perush is ketargumo. He references the translation of Onkelos. And other times, his job is to be dedicated to explaining the psukim based on the simplest understanding within the Midrashei Chazal, within the drashot that Chazal have offered us in explanation of the psukim. So says the Chafetz Chaim in Mishna Berura, שהוא מפרש את המקרא כמו שמפרש התרגום ויותר ממנו. It's very much in line with the Onkelos, and it's just Onkelos plus, so to speak. It says even more. אבל אם קראה בשאר לעז, but if you read the translation in English, in Farsi, in Arabic, in Spanish, in French, all the other languages, says the Chafetz Chaim, that's only explanation of the words of the Chumash translation, and that there are many things that are going to be missing. You're not going to be yotze lo yatzai de chovato b'makom targum. You're not going to fulfill your obligation lefisha targum mefaresh kama devarim she'en le'avin mitoch hamikra, because the targum explains many things in subtlety sometimes. The Onkelos tells you what the pasuk is trying to say, which the translation would most definitely miss. So therefore, Targum is more than just a translation. Targum Onkelos is more than just a translation, and that gives us an understanding why you can't just go through English translation and call it a day, because that does not conquer everything that there is to be understood that you would understand from the Targum. Says the Chafetz Chaim, but Rashi does cover that plus. Ve'otam psukim she'en aleim perush Rashi, and we're not telling you just to do Rashi and call it a day, but those psukim that don't have Rashi on them, yikra otan shalosh pa'amim. You read them 3 times, right? Or you read the Targum on them. Mish'eno bar hachi shavin et perush Rashi. If you don't understand Rashi, Rashi is one of the most simple, but at the same time most complex commentaries on the Chumash. It's said that Rashi's grandson, Rashi had fantastic grandsons, the best of the best. One of them is the Rashbam. Rashbam is one of the Gdolei Rishonim. He's mentioned the Tosafot. He has, he took over Rashi when Rashi passed away, and some of the Masechtot that Rashi did not finish writing on, most famously, the majority, almost the entirety of Masechet Baba Batra, since Chaf Aleph and on, is Perush Rashbam, and Rashbam has his own commentary on Chumash as well. But he famously said, "I could write a Perush like my grandfather on Shas, but I can never write a Perush like my grandfather on Chumash." Right? Rashi, in his concise and numbered words on Chumash, he asks thousands of questions and answers them without asking and answering them. If you are tuned into his words, you'll notice that he's answering this question and the other question, kushot smuyot, questions that are not mentioned necessarily directly, but he's relying on your understanding that you are bothered with those questions. That's why a little kid could read Rashi and enjoy, and know that Talmid Chacham Gdolei Ador could read Rashi and enjoy. They understand completely different things from Rashi, and that's because it is so rich and multi-layered that has something for every reader depending on their level. So therefore Rashi is to be taken serious. It's not just that, Rashi you could do instead of Targum. Rashi is a very rich Perush, which is platformed based on the Targum and builds on top of that as he goes. So says the Mishna Berura, if you don't understand Rashi, just reading words is not sufficient. It's better to read the translation in German or in English, right? In our generation, Kegon Sefer Sena Urena. This was one of the most famous Farim that even women read because it was written in Lashon Ashkenaz. It says better to do that than reading Rashi, not understanding a word of what he's saying. That they explain the parasha based on Rashi. Now, nowadays, it's very good because you have Art Scroll Rashi. So you could read the parasha with the English translation of Rashi, and that would be considered for a person to have done Rashi. Ushar chachamenu haberuyim al yesod Talmud. Fine, so that's the explanation of the Chumash based on Rashi and Chazal. Now, says the Shulchan Aruch, lechatchila Yiras Shamayim should do both. Should do Targum and Rashi. Now, the obvious question is, if I did Rashi, why do I need to do Targum? So Chafetz Chaim explains, Ki Targum yesh lo ma'ala shenitan beSinai, because Targum Unkelus is not just that Unkelus Hager, who was a Ger Tzedek, sat down one day and said, okay, let me translate the Chumash. He accepted this Targum from Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yeshua, and they accepted it from their Rebbeim and their Rebbeim. The explanation of Chumash that is mentioned in Targum Unkelus is the explanation given b'Mesorah miMoshe miSinai. So therefore, it is more important and it carries more weight and more legitimacy than your regular translation that you would have by other people. And he explains also every word of Chumash. So Rashi doesn't do that. Therefore, it's best to do them both. ובאמת, כן ראוי לנהוג כל אדם. Says Chafetz Chaim, it's not just Yiras Shamayim. Everyone should be doing Rashi every year and the Targum. Rav Moshe Feinstein, for over 70 years, he did the Rashi and Chumash every week. When he did Shnai Mikra Targum, he did every single Rashi as well. Well, he also did every single Ramban. So I don't know how exactly it works, because Ramban is much, much more in volume than Rashi. But that's Rav Moshe Feinstein, how he was noheg. Every Jew should be reading Rashi, says the Mishna Berura, every week together with the Targum. כי יש כמה פרשיות בתורה ובפרט בחלק ויקרא שאי אפשר להבינם על ידי תרגום לחוד. There are many areas of Chumash, especially in Sefer Vayikra, speaking about korbanot and the details and the intricacies that need Chazal and the Gemarot, and Targum is not going to be sufficient for understanding of those parashiot, and therefore a person should definitely do that. Says the Mishna Berura, Mi she'en beyado targum, rak chumash levad. If you only have a chumash, you should do two times the psukim, and then you wait for when you get a hold of targum and you go through the targum. So even though that you end up saying the whole parasha without targum and the whole parasha without targum a second time, and we said that a person should be pasuk by pasuk or perek by perek. This way you're doing the whole parasha, still fine. If still you are yotzeh certainly on a bedi ewod way. So says the by the way, the Kaf HaChaim, which really comes from the Shulchan Aruch Harav of Balatanya, over here says when you do Rashi and Targum, the way you should do it is you do 2 times the pasuk, then the third time you say the whole parasha with Perush Rashi, and that is sufficient as well, right? Yikra parasha shte pa'amim mikra, ובפעם השלישית לומד כל הפרשה עם פירוש רש"י, says the Kaf HaChaim. Right? Now, Kaf HaChaim also brings that according to Mekubalim, this Shulchan Aruch is very questionable. According to Mekubalim, you must be doing the Targum of Onkelos. Now, we end up saying that anyways, you should be doing Targum Onkelos, but according to Kaf HaChaim, is a much bigger deal because you're talking about Kabbalistic Sodot in the worlds above. We mentioned this already before, that Al Pi de Mekubalim, changing anything from the order is not a healthy thing, because you are messing with the Seder HaOlamot, which is supposed to be structured based on the mitzvah of Shnai Mikra Targum. There's deeper elements of understanding, mystical elements over here as well. So according to that, the Targum is a very essential part of this mitzvah. Now, the Maharshal says the other way around. The Rabbi Shlomo Luria, he was the great posek and dayan, basically the Gadol Ador of the time of Maran Shulchan Aruch in Ashkenaz, right? He actually has writings with Maran Shulchan Aruch. They exchanged letters. He was same time as the Ramah, but he was senior to the Ramah. He also has Hitkatvut. He has letters back and forth with the Ramah. He has a very strong personality, one of the greatest leaders of the Ashkenazi communities. He writes that if you only have time for one, you should do Rashi, not the Targum. So he prefers Rashi over the Targum. But again, as we mentioned, the Sfaradim, who are more drawn to the Chachmei HaKabbalah, their minhag has been that if you could only do one, you'll go with the Targum versus the Perush of Rashi. Now, this is already mentioned in Maran Chida. Maran Chida already in Birkei Yosef says this. Reb Chaim Palaji, Yitzchak Palaji, they say this as well. It's brought in Kaf HaChaim too. So this is one of the differences that will come out if you want to talk about minhag of Ashkenazim or Sfaradim. Ashkenazim, generally speaking, would be drawn after this Marshal. If you could do one, you'll do Rashi. Better to prefer Rashi versus Targum Onkelos, which is very much viable with the Shulchan Aruch. We just have to, those psukim that doesn't have Rashi, you have to make up with the Targum. But the Sfardim, generally speaking, would be following Maran Chida and the Kaf HaChaim in this particular discussion. Now, you should also not switch the order of the parasha, right? Lo yikra pasuk ha-me'uchar kodem ha-mukdam, says the Chafetz Chaim, ela yikra kaseder. You should, read it chronologically based on the order of the psukim. It's not that, okay, I'm going to focus on Mashlim today and, Shishi tomorrow, and that doesn't work. You should not go backwards. Keep the order of the psukim. Lo yikra targum tchila v'achar kach mikra. Also, you should not do the targum before twice mikra. Lo yikra l'chatchila shnayim mikra mikodem v'achar kach targum. Should be first twice the pasuk, and then only then the targum. Im efshar lo shelo yafsik b'shnayim mikra v'achar targum. If you could manage the time to do them all at once and not to have any stop between, any hefsek between talking and so on, then that would be the best, right? Hu tov ve'yafeh me'od. It's very important and very good. V'chen ra'iti mehamedaktekim. Chafetz Chaim says, I have seen the people who are careful. That's what they do. They don't. You go over to them to talk. They say, they notion to you that I'm in the middle of Shnai Mikra V'Achat Targum. You come back later. Again, we have mentioned before that Kaf Chaim writes that this is super important, especially in the discussion of the mystics of Pi Kabbalah, is even more important. V'chen ra'ui leba'al nefesh la'asot, says the Chafetz Chaim, a person should be doing this. He's actually bringing this from Harav HaChaviv, the Knesset Gdolah, Reb Chaim ben Yisrael ben Beneshti, in the name of Seder Hayom, but many other Achronim also side with this, write the same thing. And again, even though that based on the Halacha, based on the Gemara, there's no hakpada over here. If you could talk, you could pause, no problem. But again, at Kabbalah, you should not at all stop in the middle of the reading. You should read the entire thing all at once, and not with any interruptions, unless you're very thirsty, you want to just say Sha'akol, fine. That Rabbi Yehuda Yashin, Matei Yehuda, he says that's fine already. The Ben Ish Chai also brings the same thing. Kaf HaChaim says the same thing. Chazon Obadiah, Maran Obadiah says the same thing as well. So let's grab one more seif in Shulchan Aruch, a short one. Miyom Rishon ve'elach chashuv im hasibur. The Gemara says, to explain this short seif, the Gemara says that you have to be mesayem parashiyotav im hasibur. Should finish a parashiyot with the tzibur. What does that mean? That means don't do it earlier. It's not that by Parashat Bereshit you sit there and you do the Shnai Mikra V'Achat Targum and the whole Chumash. It's okay, good for next year. Right? You can't do that. It should be with the tzibur. So what's with the tzibur? You don't want to do it later either. So we mentioned later means l'chatchila. You don't want to do it. You want to be done with it before Seudat Shabbat morning, right? And you could make it up afterwards. As we mentioned, we're going to discuss this later at length. But the beginning point of it is from Sunday. Now, what's Sunday? Because Kevan Shmatchilin beminchata Shabbata, on Mincha of Shabbat you start reading the next parasha. That's already considered the point of start. So you have started it already. It's considered im hatzibur. And says the Chafetz Chaim, if so, mashkatav ha'mechaber miyom rishon. This that we say Sunday is lav davka. It really means from Shabbat afternoon after the Kriyat Torah, you could already start next week's Shnai Mikra Ve'Achat Targum, and that would be fine. Now, many Achronim write, says the Mishna Berura, that the best is to read it Erev Shabbat. The best is, Ben Ish Chai says, this is a part of the Hachanot of Shabbat B'Dibur. Says there's Hachana B'Maaseh, there's Hachana B'Dibur, and there's Hachana B'Machshava, right? Whether it is preparation of the food, Tevilat Erev Shabbat, which is accepting Tosefet Nefesh and Ruach and Neshama and Chaya and Yechida, all those things are all preparations. And says the Ben Ish Chai, the preparation of Dibur is doing Shnai Mikra Targum, and Chatchila, a person should be doing it on Erev Shabbat. But this is also, for the Ashkenazim even, he brings from the Achronim that is the best way of going about Shnai Mikra Targum. And he says, look at the Sha'aret Tshuva and Matei Yehuda, that if you're reading from the beginning of the week, part by part, is also considered mitzvah min hamuvchar, like the Shulchan Aruch writes in Beth Yosef, and you see it from the Rambam as well. Now, and this is, by the way, the Minhag of Vilna Gaon. It's brought in Sefer Ma'aserav that right after Shacharit, every morning, he would sit and do a part of the Sidra, part of the Parasha, Shnai Mikra Targum, and Erev Shabbat he would finish it. So he also had a division, and he did it every day of the week. He didn't just do it, the whole thing on Friday. Fine. Now, there is what to discuss over here more, but we're out of time. We're going to stop here, and Be'ezrat Hashem, we'll pick it up on Seif Dalit in the days to come. Hazaku Baruch.